of the offer and purchase contract that's attached to and made part of that, that agreement. I'm not going to talk in detail about lease options. If you want to know more about it, shoot me an email, give me a call. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Today I'm going to focus on the lease purchases. The difference between a lease purchase and a traditional mortgage, yes, I had to bring up the good old days again. The days where every buyer could get a loan and everybody was happy. The coolers of champagne were coming into the closing room. The champagne corks were hitting the top of the ceiling. Those were the days, back a few years ago. I just want to say, believe me, you will want to drink during a lease purchase, not so much out of joy. Much more out of necessity, believe me. I am speaking from experience here. Let's see here. The difference between a lease purchase and seller financing, if you have the option of doing seller financing versus a lease purchase, I highly recommend it. Seller financing really only occurs where the seller has property free and clear of the mortgage. So seller owns the property outright, buyer can't qualify for a loan. Buyer says, hey, look, seller, I can't qualify for a loan. What about you giving me a loan? I'll sign a promissory note over to you, and you take out a deed of trust just like a bank. And we do those all the time, especially in today's market, when there's not an existing mortgage on the property. And so what happens there is the buyer's going to be making payments. The deed transfers at the closing. The deed transfers to the buyer. He owns the property. He's making payments to the seller on this promissory note. If he doesn't make the payments, the seller's got the foreclosure rights, just like a bank. And he can foreclose on the property, get the property back. I just added something the other day because I couldn't believe I got a call on this. I hadn't heard about this and seen it for a while, but it's called an installment contract or a contract for deed. If you guys get a call on this, just run for the hills. These things are bad news. And what this is kind of like seller financing, but the seller's holding on to that deed, waiting for that last payment to come in from the bank or from the buyer. And then they give him the deed. So inevitably what ends up happening on these is buyer's making his payments, something happens, he can't make his payment, now he's in default, now the seller's still got the deed to the property and he's reaped the benefit of all these payments that have been made to him by the buyer. If that doesn't sound fair, it's not. The North Carolina courts have determined, they have frowned upon these transactions, so I don't want my name attached to them, and I'm sure you guys don't want them either. So if you get one of these coming across your desk or a call, just give me a call, give your closing attorney a call, and just say, hey, what do you think about this? Because that's the call I got the other day, and I said, do not do it at all. What's the difference between a buyer possession before closing agreement and a lease purchase? The buyer possession before closing document is for a short term. That's a situation where your buyer has a closing date scheduled on a Monday. He's got to be out of his apartment on Friday, and he wants to get into the property over the weekend. Do not try to attach an offer to purchase contract to a buyer possession for a closing document and try to claim that's a lease purchase. Because if something goes wrong, which inevitably it will, that's a one-page document that it doesn't have a lot of protections for each party. So something bad's going to happen. They're going to look to you guys. And you're going to look to me probably and say, what do we do here? And we got to figure it out. So don't just stay away from that. Only use those buyer possession before closing documents for the situation I just said, where someone needs to get in over the weekend or something like that. All right, I think I'm on to the next slide here. All right, when should you call a lawyer? You should call a lawyer as soon as you're asked to do anything other than fill in a blank. As soon as you're asked to start drafting stuff, pick up the phone, give your closing attorney a call, give me a call, and we're glad to help you out. Typically, the way I handle lease purchases is the realtors, you guys are handling the offer to purchase and contract side of this. You're hammering out the details of that. You're also, what I would suggest is that you get me the key terms to the lease purchase. And by key terms, I mean, what's the rent amount going to be? What's the term? How long is this thing going to be for? Commissions, if any. I see some ears perk up. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And any other provisions that the parties have agreed to. And then I start with that. I'll send out a rough draft to the parties. Parties will look it over. Inevitably, they'll cross through some stuff. They'll add stuff. Send it back to me. I'll redraft. And the process continues until version 15, where we all have the one everybody's agreed to here, where everything's ready to be executed. Inspections, and this is key because it's a little strange because you definitely want to do your inspections up front. Right up front, you want to do your inspections, and basically the buyer is going to be buying this property in an as-is condition at the end of the term. You don't want a buyer test driving a house for 2 years and then doing inspections, 30 days before closing. Now, there's also some other time frames in there you need to worry about, because if it's a financing situation where the buyer is going to be applying for a loan, those dates are going to be down the road. The inspections are going to be up front in the offer to purchase the contract. But they're going to be, if they're going to apply for a loan, that's got to be down the road. Let's see here. Drafting the agreement. What needs to be in the agreement? You guys as agents know what needs to be in the offer and purchase contract to best protect your client. And what I would suggest is if you're approached with a lease purchase agreement, just call, if someone approached you and said, hey, I want to have your client sign this, it's a lease purchase. Call your closing attorney, run it by them, and run it by me, if you're using me, and I'm glad to look at it for you and make sure everything's good. All the terms are carefully negotiated, and if I'm representing, if a listing agent calls me and says, my seller's open to doing a lease purchase, and I'm drafting the agreement, well, obviously I'm going to be representing the seller in that, and I'm going to draft it swayed towards the seller's best interest. So if you're the buyer's agent, just make sure their interests are protected. Run it by another attorney, and just be sure of that. Because if something goes wrong, they're going to turn to you and say, why didn't you tell me to go to another attorney? Get them to look this over. Let's see here. I think I'm on to the third slide. All right, these are the terms. These are terms that need to be in the actual lease purchase agreement. The first one is the purchase term. And what that term says is that the buyer is going to be obligated to purchase this property at the end of the lease term based upon the terms of the offer to purchase a contract that's attached as Exhibit A to this document. Again, the terms of the offer to purchase a contract are going to be fully negotiated out. Terms of the lease purchase are going to be fully negotiated out, and they're signed together, and they're attached together. You don't want to sign an offer to purchase contract and then say, now let's do that lease purchase thing. Because then, if it doesn't work out, then you're under contract, and that's how that's going to work out. Let's see here. The term. How long is the lease portion of this going to be? The first question you need to ask your client, if you're representing the buyer, is why are we doing a lease purchase here? Is it because your credit score is at 540 and you need a 700 to get a loan? Well, is 1 year going to be enough time to turn around your credit? I'm not a credit expert or anything like that, but it's been my experience with these that people underestimate the amount of time it takes to fix credit. So if it's a credit issue, the buyer needs to talk to their potential lender, and the reason they're probably doing a lease purchase is they've probably been denied for a loan. So what they need to do is they need to go back to their bank and say, what do I need to do and how long is this going to take for me to get a loan? And then that's what you're going to use as determining the length of the lease portion of this. Let's see here. It also, just lays out the term of the lease. So, and I do them from a year. I've done them 6 months. I've done it for 3 years, guys. So whatever it's going to take to get everything in order, that's how long you're going to want to do this. Let's see. A non-refundable fee. This has been. This was kind of new. It wasn't in my original form, but we started doing this a lot more. This is not earnest money. Earnest money is going to be in the offer to purchase a contract. This is a fee. This is basically a fee paid by the buyer. It's not refundable to the seller. Basically saying, seller, thank you for taking your property off the market for 2 years. Here's this. Let's credit it back at closing against the purchase price. And that's not mandatory. It's not required. That's just something the parties have to come to an agreement on. Most lenders, of course, at the end of the day,